It is your Friday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are having a great day out there as well. Really good show coming up. Andrew Krammer from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a few minutes to talk Vikings. Just finished up mini camp for the Vikings. There's one more week of OTAs, organized team activities, before they break for probably like 6 weeks at least until training camp starts. OTAs aren't for everyone this round, by the way. It's only for kind of some of the younger players. I think 5-year and more veterans are exempt from it. I'm sure they're excited about that. More of a install, learning kind of thing. But plenty to glean from minicamp. Andrew and I will talk about how J.J. McCarthy looks so far, about the impact of the Justin Jefferson contract, some of the battles on the defensive side, on the offensive line, things like that. So stick around for that in just a little while. Some interesting PWHL Minnesota news at the end of the show. And we'll get some NBA talk here in just a minute. Some stuff with the NBA Finals and some stuff with the Wolves. It seems like they can't go a day without making some sort of news with the Wolves. More of that with the ownership discussion. We'll get to that here in just a minute. First, though, what did I miss? Well, hopefully you missed it. I don't think you wanted to watch Twins-Yankees. You've seen it too many times. You've seen the Yankees clobber the Twins too many times. Happened again last night. Now, the only good news is that's the end of the season series between these two teams. The bad news is Twins went 0-6 against the Yankees in their season series. Nothing really new there. Now, when it's been a better year, the Twins have been more competitive against the Yankees, so that's probably some kind of a warning sign, a red flag of how poorly they fared against the Yankees. And frankly, was looking this up, how poorly they have fared against the best teams in the American League right now. Check this out. Against the Yankees, Guardians, and Orioles, the three teams in the American League with the best records, the Twins are 0-14 this season. 0-14. Now, that means they're 33-15 against everybody else, which is good. That's why they're still kind of hanging around, not out of this. 33-29, not a terrible start by any stretch. Hot and cold, but not terrible by any stretch. But going 0-14 against the best teams in the league, and frankly, not looking terribly competitive in a lot of those games, especially against the Yankees. That's concerning because last year I feel like one of the things they did well was they showed up against the best teams, and that gave you some hope going into the postseason. Like, hey, guess where you're going to see the best teams? Yeah, the playoffs, right? You're not going to be playing the bad teams in the playoffs. Those are the good teams in the playoffs. It's just logic. So last year when the Twins fared better against the good teams in the regular season and at least held their own, you could say, okay, going into the playoffs next year, they have a fighting chance. Last year's Twins went 4-3 against the Yankees. Now, the Yankees were a little bit down, but that's still, that was part of what gave you confidence. The Twins went 4-2 against Houston during the regular season, and obviously that didn't carry over to the postseason. They lost to the Astros in the division round, but still, thinking about how they played against those teams made you think, okay, this isn't just a nice little regular season team. This is a team that could have some playoff success, and again, won their first playoff game after 18 straight losses, won a playoff series for the first time since 2002. That was part of their story last year. So much of that story was starting pitching, and this all comes back to starting pitching to me. Yes, the offense has been inconsistent. Yes, the bullpen has had its moments where it's been, hittable. It's the starting pitching that has told the story by and large when they're playing against these better teams this year. Last year, Twin starters had the second best ERA in all of Major League Baseball. Second best ERA in all of Major League Baseball. They went into almost every game feeling like they had a chance to win, and a lot of times had the pitching matchup edge, the starting pitching matchup edge. Now, of course, they cut payroll this offseason. Sonny Gray departs. He had a really good start to this year. Struggled a little bit lately, but his ERA is still just a little bit over 3. That is very good. I think they would take that right now. They would take Sonny Gray's excellence right now. Let go of Kenta Maeda. He's struggled this year, and now he's injured. So it wasn't necessarily like those were moves that Sonny Gray, in a perfect world, you'd have Sonny Gray back. But it's not like those were moves where you said, okay, they definitely screwed up. They got to have those guys back, things like that. But you look at it kind of overall, and you say, okay, The pitching is depleted this year. The pitching is less than. They're trying to get by with less than. Right now, their starting pitcher ERA is 25th in Major League Baseball. 25th in Major League Baseball. So that is a huge difference. Almost a full run higher this year at 4.73 versus what it was last year. Now, they've had some bad starts lately that have inflated that number a little bit. And a lot of it's Pablo Lopez. Let's be honest. Pablo Lopez not having a great year. He got rocked yesterday against the Yankees, gave up a ton of walks. His ERA is in the mid-fives. Can't have that from your ace. So all sorts of like hand-wringing. Is Pablo Lopez okay? I don't know. Health-wise, he seems like he's okay. He's had some good starts in there, so it's not like it's necessarily panic time, but he's got to turn his season around. They need him to be their ace, to pitch like their ace like he did a lot of last year, especially down the stretch and in the postseason. He is not pitching like that. So some of it's just Pablo Lopez has to pitch better, but some of it is the pitching depth. As much as it's been seemingly okay, as much as Simeon Woods Richardson has given them decent starts as the number 5 guy, as much as Chris Paddock has given them some decent starts as number 4, although his ERA is bloating up into the mid-fives now as well. As good as Joe Ryan has been, and as dependable as Bailey Ober has been, like you look at it and you look at all 5 and you're like, okay, there's not a ton to quibble with, but you add it all up and performance-wise, they're not getting it done. So that to me is the big thing that's hurting them, particularly against these good teams. Good teams are going to hammer bad pitching, and the Twins starting pitching has not been great. They're getting hammered by a lot of these good teams, and that gives me concerns. Even if the Twins pull out of this next level skid, 3 in a row now to the Yankees, even if they pull out of this rather quickly, start playing better baseball, they start playing the Pirates now, even if they start playing better right now, you got concerns about the big picture and how they hold up against good teams this season. Couple of NBA things before we talk Vikings. Turns out Dallas Mavericks are in fact beatable, are in fact human. Boston routs Dallas in Game 1 of the NBA Finals Thursday night, 107-89. Kyrie Irving held in check. Luka Doncic had a pretty good game, but he was really the only one for Dallas that got going. Boston runs circles around him, like I said, holds them to 89 points. Maybe that's just, Dallas kind of coming off this run, kind of feeling okay, feeling out this next series. But how this series goes, how Dallas versus Boston goes, is going to give you a certain amount of feeling about the Timberwolves, isn't it? Because the Timberwolves just lost to Dallas in 5 games. If Boston easily dispatches Dallas in this series, it will make you feel a little bit differently about how far or how close the Wolves are from being an actual championship contender versus just being a nice Western Conference playoff run kind of team. So keep an eye on that. That was Game 1. We'll see how Game 2 in Boston goes. Maybe Dallas is just maybe it was just a down game, a bad game for them, but pay attention to that. Also pay attention to the Wolves' ownership situation. Michael Bloomberg, who has more money than almost anyone in the world, has apparently joined the A-Rod Lowry ownership group team. Doesn't sound like it really has much of an impact on any of this arbitration, this forced arbitration that's going to happen to see who owns the team. But if Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez kind of win that case, they've got all of a sudden got a whole lot more financial backing. I mean, Bloomberg's got over $100 billion. He could buy a lot of NBA teams at the same time if that was legal. So that's an interesting development. Kind of makes you wonder if they could get this kind of support from Michael Bloomberg. Why didn't they get it 3 months ago and avoid this whole mess of payments, stuff like that? So we will see where that's going. But Michael Bloomberg joining forces with A-Rod and Mark Lowry on their bid to buy the Timberwolves. Let's talk to Andrew Krammer from the Star Tribune right now. A little Vikings talk, right, Andrew? We got some time. It's mini camp right now. It's not going to be, after this, we got one more week of OTAs, then they kind of scatter for a while, right?
Yeah, one more week. They decided to move up the mandatory part to get all the veterans like Justin Jefferson in 1 week earlier. I think it was an olive branch from Kevin O'Connell to the veterans of giving them 1 extra week of summer. But all the rookies and all the young guys got to stay around for next week. Yep.
Well, it's organized team activities next week, so we'll see what comes of that. But minicamp that's the mandatory piece, and obviously the biggest piece of news to come out of this so far was Justin Jefferson signing his long extension right on the eve of camp. we're going to talk on Access Vikings, kind of like the in depth and the negotiations of that and stuff like that. But I want to hear from you, just like what your takeaways, just your big picture takeaways from the deal he signed, getting that done now, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. With Jefferson doing it, it was a long time coming. He talked about since he was a kid, obviously, but with the Vikings, they had been talking about this over the year, and it really cements him as the cornerstone and the franchise leader of this team. And he talked about that, saying, "I want to be the leader of this team." And being paid 35 million, he's obviously the highest paid player on the team, highest paid non-quarterback in football. And when you've got a transition period where you're going from Kirk Cousins to JJ McCarthy with Sam Darnold in the mix, this veteran journeyman. You need a leader to step in there. You need the best player to kind of pull you out in tough moments in games and show you that I can win us games by myself. And one of the funniest things about the press conference and Justin talking about it in front of his family who was there and some of his friends who showed up was he was asked, "What do you think about the direction of this team?" Because they very much are rebuilding right now. And he said, "Well, they got me. So
Yeah.
we'll be all right." That's the kind of confidence that leadership shows, that as long as he does everything right off the field, as all reports are that he has so far and everything we've heard, he's that's the ascension. It's the next step for him was to take the NFL by storm like he did, and now kind of take the reins of the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, and it's interesting to try to do that from the wide receiver position, right? Like it's a little bit inside out from how a lot of teams want to build, but you can't necessarily choose the order you do this in. You've already got Justin Jefferson. I didn't get the sense that there was any like real danger of Justin Jefferson getting traded, going somewhere else. Like it just, especially listening to Kwesi talk, it just kind of felt like it was more of a matter of time. And like you trade good players. You can even trade very good players if you get value. You don't trade people who are on the Hall of Fame trajectory if you think you're going to be, a team that could contend during that window.
Yeah, regardless of all that it was talked about, everybody privately to publicly has been adamant that there was never a discussion about trading him. Kwesi said it in February. This goes back to the combine when at first, I think a first report came out in like January or something like that about the possibility of him being available. And it was unfounded. It was never true. And unfortunately, these things catch fire and you see it get aggregated, and the more headlines it creates on a Google search, the more credence the report gets. But it was never true. The Vikings always wanted to hold on to him, always wanted to pay him. And ESPN's Adam Schefter reported as much, that they offered him much less back in September than what he eventually signed for. I think the report was $28 million per year back in September. I mean, that wasn't even top of wide receiver money at that point. And that report does track with what we heard from the general manager publicly, saying that we want to pay Justin like one of the highest paid non-quarterbacks, not the highest paid non-quarterback. Well, what changed over these last 9-10 months? Well, he's now the highest paid non-quarterback. So the team budged, they gave him the money he wanted, and that's why we're here.
We'll see how long he's the highest paid, right? Like this always happens. Like next person comes along and breaks that at some point. You never know how long you're going to be. But in the moment, it means something. Even if he says it's not about the money and we believe him, like he's definitely motivated by bigger picture goals. Like there is a status that comes with that goes beyond dollars.
Oh, absolutely. It comes with the respect, and the respect and money go hand in hand in the NFL because it's a salary cap sport, certainly. And even in non-cap sports, you want that ranking. Justin wanted to be number one, not just on his team, but in the league at his position. And certainly now the benchmark they looked at was not just number one at his position, but number one among all non-quarterbacks, which is a different ballpark that I wonder, will CeeDee Lamb be able to get into that ballpark? Jamar Chase, maybe, certainly, but that Brown ownership with the Bengals does not cut checks the way that the Wilfs do. So that is going to be fascinating. If people thought the Jefferson thing dragged out, I can't wait to see how long the Chase thing is going to drag out, because I feel like Jefferson just made that a lot harder for them over there.
They're going to tag him twice and let him go at a certain age. It's going to be just ugly by the end. We'll see. So we've had a couple days of camp before of mini camp before we recorded. We got one more to go before it'll come after this recording. But what are some of the some of the impressions just of what we've seen on the field, any early kind of like depth chart hints. We got Dalton Reisner back in the mix. What are some of the big non-Jefferson storylines right now?
I think this defense isn't getting talked about enough. And when we talk about the rebuild, it was really there, right?
Yeah.
Offense, you're rebuilding at one position, but defensively, it's the almost the entire group. And we haven't seen them all collectively on the field together because Andrew Van Ginkel, who is getting paid $10 million a year, the former Dolphin, he will be a starter. It's just a matter of, does he start at edge rusher and Dallas Turner comes off the bench? Does he start at inside linebacker, which he can do? You've got Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace there. One guy I don't think we've written about him, but he doesn't get talked about a lot, who they see as making even a bigger step than he did last year, was Ivan Pace. Ivan Pace came in as an undrafted rookie, took a starting job essentially next to Jordan Hicks, a veteran, and was great. And when Hicks went down late in the year, Pace stepped up, took the in-helmet microphone, relayed the play calls, took the communication, the checks before the snap. For a rookie who was just playing at, University of Cincinnati, that is incredibly impressive. And he played well. And they are giving him now that duty, at least this spring, of having that in-helmet speaker and microphone, that connection with Brian Flores throughout practices. They're trying to see if he can handle that. And that's huge. And if the Vikings can be what they want to be under Brian Flores, which is more multiple, more versatile, play more man coverage, be even more aggressive than they were last year. A big reason is going to be because Ivan Pace is able to handle the stuff they're giving him, and able to fit what Flores wants, which is a kid that can blitz, get after the quarterback, and certainly drop back in coverage. So to me, it's this defense. Every day you go out there and we watch this defense from the practice, from the sideline, and it seems like we're seeing something different. One day it's Dallas Turner moving around. One day it's a different trio of defensive backs with three corners or three safeties or both. It's always fun to see. It's far different from the Mike Zimmer days of, like, as good as they were pretty vanilla compared to what we see out of Brian Flores.
I want to get back to that in a minute, but pace is interesting just because we see this a lot. It's not unheard of that so many people miss on a guy. Anybody could have had him. Anybody could have drafted him at any point, but he goes undrafted. How did he just kind of slip through the cracks given how good he looks right now?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the first thing's the stature. It's because he's just so short.
Right.
And the Vikings talked about that. They said if he wasn't, I can't remember what he's officially listed at, 5'10" or maybe even 5'11". He's incredibly short. And the Vikings, I think Brian Flores, is one of his first comments about Pace last spring was, well, that gives him good leverage. And that's just a nice way of saying this guy's incredibly small. He is hard to get his hands on. And I think it took a creative coach like Brian Flores, and don't give them too much credit. They didn't draft him. So
No.
maybe if Flores was running the front office, they would have drafted him. But Flores talked them into paying up a mint. And actually looking back at it, they outbid, I remember now, the Dallas Cowboys for his services. The Cowboys were like the other suitor who was trying to outbid the Vikings for him. But they got into a bidding war. They really wanted him. And it was, I think he went undrafted because of his size. And frankly, when you talk to him, he's not a great interview. So I could see how when you get into a job interview setting where you're not playing football and you're not hitting people, how he wouldn't necessarily impress, because he's quiet. He searches for words a lot, and he's communicating and orating that way is not necessarily his thing, but man, he can take down any running back and cover, which is just the impressive part about that young man.
You talked about the defense and what they're giving Flores to work with now. And, last year he did a lot with, kind of a defense that was in transition, that had gotten rid of a lot of veterans from the year before. They've got to be pretty excited about what he might be able to do with this influx of talent, both from the draft and from free agency.
Yeah, not just that, just the development too. Because think about a guy like Pace, who developed in that year under Flores, or Josh Metellus, who went into such a multiple role and developed. What else can he do for a guy like Mekhi Blackman, who's coming back in his second year and might be that third corner if they play three corners more often? Or a guy like Jay Ward or Theo Jackson, these backup safeties that they seem to like so much. In that note too, we're seeing Lewis Seen, a former top pick. Brian Flores is sticking to his word. I don't care if you were a top pick. I'm not going to play you. We're seeing him still as that number 6 safety, really buried in the depth chart so far this spring. So there's a lot of excitement about Flores for what he can do with a lot of the talent he's got. And it's also interesting to see how he gets the most out of guys that you wouldn't see coming. Because as we talk about Scene and Booth, these still are guys who are not really getting a whole lot of run this spring.
Okay, so we got to talk quarterbacks now. What's the early look? How's JJ looking? What do we know about pecking order so far? Accuracy, whatever you want to talk about with the quarterbacks.
Yes, I thought Sam Darnold has had a strong I should say through the 4 or maybe 5, I can't remember now, open practices to reporters because they've had 8 to 10 of them. Outside of that, he's looked strong in front of us. He has thrown pretty accurately. He has taken every rep with the first team offense, just like Kevin O'Connell said he was going to. The Vikings want to start Sam Darnold this year, at least week 1. They've said that, you can hear people say that privately. They've also said that publicly, the leaders on this team. And you're seeing at how they go about this offseason. Josh McCown, Kevin O'Connell, Grant Udinski, the quarterback's coach, all of these people who were so instrumental in getting the quarterback ready are spending most of the time in front of reporters anyway with Sam Darnold. They're spending that time with the first team offense. That's where Justin Jefferson also jumped right into. So when is JJ McCarthy going to throw to Justin Jefferson? I'm not sure, outside of just kind of tossing the ball around, because it's going to take Sam Darnold not grabbing the reins of this thing and not being consistent and not being good for them to consider a switch, because they want to try to have a slow plan and a slow, gradual runway for JJ McCarthy, who's only 21 years old, the youngest quarterback taken in the first round this year, and also had the least experience in terms of volume of passes than any other quarterback taken in the first round. So to me, I'm just seeing what they told us in terms of their quarterback plan is coming to fruition, and that they're going to try and make Sam Darnold that guy. And when you watch it too, look, I'm not the former quarterback who's coaching the Minnesota Vikings, but when you watch JJ McCarthy, he looks night and day behind Sam Darnold. There are very few passes are connecting at this point. You can see the special arm talent, though. You can see when it does connect, how it can be special. But right now, we're just not seeing that consistency, which is to be expected right now.
This would qualify as nice problem to have, but let's say we get into the season and Sam Darnold's playing really well and they're winning, but JJ McCarthy is also breathing down his neck in practice and looks like he's ready to go. What happens at that point?
I think Sam Darnold stays in until until the he's no longer the hot hand. That's just how coaches are. You see this all the time. Coaches are always reluctant to put in the unknown commodity. It doesn't matter if it's a first round Justin Jefferson who's starting behind BC Johnson out of camp. Right. It doesn't matter if it's Stephon Diggs who did the same thing. Eric Kendricks also had to wait behind Gerald Hodges. You just see this. They're very reluctant to put rookies in. And I think a former quarterback in Kevin O'Connell is even more sensitive and even more aware of how rushing a kid out there before he's ready, or how even waiting and holding him back too long can still be beneficial to make sure he's, doubly make sure that he's ready. O'Connell's aware of that, and the stops that he's been in with young quarterbacks, from Dwayne Haskins in Washington to seeing some of the young quarterbacks that they tried to groom in LA. He knows and is aware, and I should say even the time in the NFL he spent with different teams. He knows and is aware of the plans of what fails, what works, and what he wants to try. And he's told us he wants to keep McCarthy on the bench. So if Darnold plays well, like you said, great problem to have. I think they ride that out, and then they go let somebody else pay him somewhere else.
Good points. A few other things, Andrew. Offensive line is interesting. It's always interesting with this team. And they bring back Dalton Reisner recently, and maybe Dalton didn't get the offers that he wanted probably for the second straight year. He's probably a little frustrated, but at least he has a home here. He knows the system. How do you see the starting 5 shaking out now that Dalton Reisner is back?
Yeah, he started 11 games, right? Remember, he comes in last September. He competes with the backups, and then they trade Ezra Cleveland, the guy that they had started for years, to start Dalton Reisner. And part of that is Ezra was a free agent, so he was going to walk, and they didn't want to re-sign him, so they wanted to get something for him. I don't think their opinion of Dalton Reisner has been that high to begin with. That's why they brought him in last August, if you remember, and then they waited him out. Yeah. And they waited him out until they got him at a better contract number in September. And then they really waited him out again this spring after 11 starts. And he only got 1.1 million guaranteed, which is essentially the veteran minimum salary. So they essentially said, here's the veteran minimum guaranteed. And then he can maybe earn a little bit more on top of that. But what he signed for is less than what they gave Blake Brandel, who was a backup last year, who they didn't consider really for a starting job, but they want to set up this year to be a starter. They've put him in at left guard. They've given him every rep so far. He's bigger. He's 6'4". He's 315. He's built more like a tackle. He was a tackle at Oregon State. And they want more size on the inside. They want to run the ball more. They want to clear more running lanes. And these are all things that Dalton Risner, through 5 years in the NFL, has not been that great at. He was just an upgrade in pass protection over Ezra Cleveland, they felt like. And that's why they decided to make that switch. So Risner comes back to being a backup, and they're going to see if Blake Brandel can be that guy.
Interesting. What else are we learning? I mean, it's just June, it's early June, but this is kind of like when you make everybody come back and you make it mandatory, this is kind of like laying a lot of the groundwork for what they're going to want to do in training camp. You're starting to see some of the depth chart, some of the battles kind of taking shape. What else of note is there?
Yeah, I think it's a story old as time. Every spring, the veterans or, the new veterans come into a team and they, bestow the knowledge they have from other teams onto theirs. But Shaq Griffin was a signing the Vikings had late in free agency. He's a former Seahawk, former Jaguar, was with the Texans last year. He's a bigger 6-foot corner, aggressive, can play man coverage. He's very experienced. They want him to start opposite Byron Murphy. And he's talked about how he's brought some of the techniques from Seattle that he learned from Richard Sherman, from Earl Thomas, some of that stuff in there. And so I think that's notable because Brian Flores has been outspoken before they even got to the draft about wanting to play more man coverage, wanting to be more aggressive. And if you can play more man, theoretically, you can blitz more people. You can truly zero blitz if you can man everybody up. And those are the kind of things that Brian Flores wants to do. So Shaq Griffin's going to be a big key for that. If he plays well, then the progression and evolution of this defense could go much farther. So I think his arrival early on in June has been a good one so far.
What about Aaron Jones? We heard from him the other day. How do you think the running backs sort themselves out?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be obviously the lead guy. The question is, how much do they run him? I don't think he's had over 300 carries in a single season, or 300 touches, maybe even in a single season in the NFL. He always split time with A.J. Dillon, and before that, in Green Bay, I think it was somebody else. So, but the Vikings don't run the ball a lot either. So how much workload is there going to be if Kevin O'Connell wants to run the ball more? He still might rank 20th in run calls if that means coming up from 28th or wherever they were. So I think Aaron Jones is going to be the unquestioned leader. They're throwing the ball to him a lot too. So even when they pass the ball, he's going to be involved. And then I think Ty Chandler is somebody that they absolutely think can be more of a 3-down complementary component to Aaron Jones. Because last year he was just a spot starter. They didn't trust him a ton. Once Alexander Madison really struggled and Cam Akers went down, then they started putting Ty Chandler in more. But that's a kid that I think they're going to give every opportunity to truly be that number 2 guy this year.
Sounds good, Andrew. Probably give you a little bit of a rest here because, like you said, they're going to be off pretty soon till the end of July. But appreciate the catch up on the Vikings. A lot to watch in training camp. It's going to be annoying, right? All anybody's going to care about is JJ McCarthy, and he's not really going to be the on-field story for them early on. It sounds like, but everybody, that's all anybody's going to care about.
Absolutely. Yeah. They'll be asking about him, but he'll probably be throwing to, Lucky Jackson and some of these other third string wide receivers that they've got. That's just the truth because he's still learning the offense. He's still learning the cadences, learning the footwork and how it pairs to the route depths. It's not like Jim Harbaugh was running this like disciplined West Coast offense over there. That's not how it worked. I mean, he's a great coach, but college is a completely different game.
It is indeed. Andrew, appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks.
Great stuff from Andrew. Listen to our Access Vikings podcast as well. A little more in-depth breakdown of the Justin Jefferson negotiations with myself, Andrew, and Ben Gessling. That should go live sometime today as well. So listen up for that and plenty of their camp observations as well. Let us finish with the cooler. Interesting story reported by The Athletic / New York Times. Natalie Darwitz, general manager of PWHL Minnesota. PWHL Minnesota, first year in this new league, wins the championship Natalie Darwitz reportedly out as general manager. Don't have a lot of details in terms of who initiated the decision, why this is happening, things like that, but seems like she put together an awfully good team. They won the championships. I don't get this story. I'm sure we'll get more details at some point and figure out what exactly is happening, but reportedly Natalie Darwitz not coming back as PWHL Minnesota's general manager. So interested to hear what, kind of the why of all that when it does come out. That will do it for me today. Hope you guys have a great Friday. It looks beautiful outside. Get outside all weekend. These are like I said, like I often say, these are the days we wait for. These are the days we trudge through most winters. Last winter was fine, but these are the winters. These are the times we trudge through most winters to get to. So do not let these days pass you by. Until Monday, Royce back with me Monday. I am Michael Rand. We will talk to you then.